Amen. Good hearing those stories and testimonies of what God is doing in people's lives and how He's moving, because He is. Good to see some faces I'm familiar with here tonight. Good to see Macy and Morgan and Beth Ann Johnson. Of course, the Johnson that needs to be here the most, not here, Rodney. Because I had a word from the Lord for him if he'd been here tonight. I just got as clear as day, and it was, Rodney, listen to your father-in-law. Yeah, that's confirmation right there, isn't it? Yeah. So you all take that message home to him, okay? And it may not have the same effect not coming here. But no, Rodney's one of my best friends in the world. And he does need to listen to his father-in-law. It is good to hear those stories. And one thing I always have to be kind of careful about is I don't want to sound like a prophet of doom. Because I do study trends and I see what's going on in America, you know, and how the church is in decline overall in our nation. You know, there's not a single county in the entire United States that has more people going to church this year than last year. And that's true every year. Several years ago, there was one county in Hawaii, of all places, that showed a positive growth. And the way you would measure that is the number of baptisms versus the number of live births. And the number of baptisms all over America is behind the number of live births. And attendance also is down all over America. So you see those kind of trends, and you realize that, you know, that things need to change. And we need to do something different. But I don't want to sound like a prophet of doom, because I have confidence in the church. In fact, the church is God's plan. There's not a plan B. Jesus said in Matthew 16, when Peter made his great confession, the confession that the church has been built upon for thousands of years, when Jesus asked his disciples, hey, who do people say that I am? Because there was a buzz about Jesus. Now we read that now and think, well, gosh, how could people not have known who he was because of all the things he was doing? But you've got to remember, this was in the first century. There was no CNN embedded reporter following Jesus. You know, they weren't getting information, you know, on a right as it happened basis. I mean, they were hearing things about Jesus. The fame was spreading, but as far as a mass appeal, you know, it was limited to crowds wherever he was. But people were hearing things about Jesus, and so he asked his disciples one day, who do people say I am? And they said, well, some say you're John the Baptist. So this is after John the Baptist had been killed. And some say you're Jeremiah or one of the prophets or Elijah. I mean, those were all pretty good answers, pretty good company. But Jesus said, well, who do you say that I am? Because ultimately that's the question. Who do you say Jesus is? It's that personal confession. And Peter said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said, right, you are, Peter. And that's the rock that I'm going to build my church. So the church belongs to God. Jesus is the builder of the church. And so it belongs to Him. And so I'm absolutely confident in the church. I'm just not sure what it might look like 20 years from now. And I think we have to keep our hearts and our minds and our eyes open to the wind of God's Spirit and how it's moving in our midst. So we can follow His direction and be that missional people that we're called to be. People on mission. People on God's mission. That's who the church is. We're people on mission together. So I'm very, very confident in God's plan. But it's interesting, He only mentions church twice in the entire Gospels. All four Gospels. The word church is only used twice. Once there, Matthew 16. Another one's talking about, you know, going before your adversary and bringing them, you know, to settle a conflict. But otherwise, Jesus doesn't mention the church. He establishes the fact that He owns it and He's building it. I will build my church. So it belongs to Him, doesn't belong to me, doesn't belong to you, doesn't belong to the Kentucky Conference, doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to Jesus. It's his body. And so he owns it, he builds it, and that's the only place he ever mentions it. But what he does mention a lot is about following him. And not only following him, but going out and making other disciples who will follow him. In fact, the only thing Jesus ever called us to do, he never called us to grow a church. He called us to make disciples. And the reality is you can grow a church and not make disciples. I mean, you can get a whole lot of people together for a singing. You can get a whole lot of people together for a program. You can get a lot of people to come out for something and not make disciples. But if you make disciples, you'll always get a church. If you really invest your life in making disciples, it sounds like you're doing a great job. If you've got 6 seniors who are still following the Lord and still involved in a faith community, growing in their faith. I know some of those youth that were mentioned. I hang out with them. Samantha and Will, I know them well. I know Meredith well. Went to the Dominican Republic with them this past summer on a mission trip. So I know you've got some real quality product coming out of this church. So that speaks highly of you. But there's a whole generation of them out there that we've got to reach out to. And last night I busted your cover and identified your age group and all that kind of stuff, and had the builders all come up and sing. You know what the young people want from you? They don't want more programs. They don't want more buildings. They don't want more staff. They want your relationship. They want to be with you. That's why they've got Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and thousands and thousands and thousands of connections that, again, like I said last night, are a mile wide but an inch deep. Because they're longing, they're hungry, they're looking for something more, something deeper. They long for a sense of connection, a sense of community. And it can be as simple as just opening up your house and saying, hey, come to my house for dinner. Carol Weddle over at Lindsey Wilson, we have some huddles, we call them, with students. Like I've got a group that I meet with some, and she's got a group of girls, and they go to her house, Carol Weddle's house, to eat dinner once a week, and she can't get them to leave. I mean, poor Jean's already passed out by the time, at 10 o'clock and 10:30, Carol's having to shoo them out the door because they don't want to leave. They want to come and stay. I've got a group that I meet with, and hardly a day goes by they don't say, hey, Dr. Calhoun, when are we getting together again? Now, I'm 56. I realize I'm kind of cool, but, I don't know that 21-year-olds or 20-year-olds would want to hang out, but they do. They want that connection. They want somebody who will love them, who will show them the way. And what you have to give them is you. That's all you need to give them. Open your house, open your table. It's amazingly how simple Jesus did things. As I said last night, it's almost so simple we miss it. We sold bracelets several years ago, WWJD, right? What would Jesus do? And it became a bumper sticker, t-shirt, bracelet. Everybody had their WWJD, which is a nice concept from a great book called In His Steps. But we sold these bracelets, and the reality is I wanted to change it. I want to change the bracelet from WWJD to WDJD. What did Jesus do? Just go do that. Just read the Gospels and see what Jesus did and say, okay, Jesus, I'm going to do that because I want to be like you. Then I want to make disciples like you made disciples, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to do what Jesus did. We don't need a bracelet for it. We just need to read about it and do it. And one thing Jesus did a lot of, which is anybody can do this. This is not rocket surgery. Or was that? Okay, you understand, all right? I actually did that on purpose. I hope you know that, but at least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But yeah, this is not complicated. Again, it's very, very simple. Jesus sat down and ate dinners with people. He had a meal with people. It's amazing when you read through the Gospels, especially the Gospel of Luke, how many things happened around the table. Spiritual truths were taught, miracles happened, people were healed. I mean, some of the greatest lessons that we have were because of a fellowship around a table. Now, I don't know about you, but I can eat. I enjoy eating, in fact. So that's simple, isn't it? I mean, everybody's got to eat, right? And so if you open your table and invite people into your life, that's a great way to do it. Just break bread together. When we first moved to Lexington to start Hope Springs Church, we moved in our house and said, okay, Lord, now what? Because we didn't have any members. It was just me, my wife, and my 3 daughters, and they had heard everything I had to say. So I had no new sermons for them, okay? So they didn't want to hear me preach. They instead, so what do we do now? How are we going to start this church? And the Lord said, well, why don't you start next door? So I went next door and I met the guy, and turns out he was a very successful car salesman who made 6 figures a year selling cars and put most of it up his nose with cocaine. And he and I became great buddies. And it was 2.5 years. 2.5 years of opening my life and inviting him in. His name was David too. And him being at our table, eating dinner, arguing about God. He tried to get clean from drugs. He was trying to do his best without God. He'd get clean for about 30 days and tell me how great he was doing. I'd go, that's awesome, David. Come in, we'll have something to eat. And he'd come in. We'd sit down and eat, have some coffee, whatever. He'd tell me how great he's doing. He didn't really need God. I said, okay, well, gosh, man, you're awesome. Then he'd relapse again. Then he'd come back. Well, I didn't make it again. Yeah. Tell me all this. Finally, one day I told him, I said, David, if I were you, I think I'd just get high and just forget about it. He looked at me kind of funny. I said, yeah, really. I said, if I was going to hell, I just wouldn't want to remember the trip anyway. I mean, if you're going to go to hell anyway, if you're going to leave God out of your life, go to hell, why remember it? I mean, just get knocked out of your brain so you don't even remember the journey, because it's not going to be fun the rest of your life. Nothing's going to ever change if nothing ever changes. And then 2.5 years into that, I had the joy of baptizing David. First time he ever came to church, he drove around the parking lot for 2 weeks on Sundays, but he wouldn't come in. First time he ever came to worship, it was like 10 minutes left to go in the sermon. Came in that late. And he said the door felt like it weighed 800 pounds. He couldn't even open the door. And after it's over, I caught him outside. I can't even tell you what he said, because you can't talk like that in church. But I said, so David, what did you think about it? And he was, well, it's pretty blankety-blank good. Long I didn't understand some of that blankety-blank stuff. I mean, he said out there telling me all this, people going out of church. And we're just going, yeah, well, good. Yeah, I'm glad you had a good day. Yeah. Those are the kind of people that Jesus hung out with. That's what he did. He invited people into his life. It's real simple. He just opened his life and invited people in. In Luke 15, 1 and 2, if I were to give you a Bible quiz tonight, and I said, okay, tell me what the best known verse in the Bible is, I'd probably hear a lot of John 3:16. If I said, what's the best known commandment, you'd probably say the 10 Commandments, or some might say the Great Commandment, love the Lord thy God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. If I said, what's the best known teaching, maybe you'd say Sermon on the Mount. Best known parable, probably the prodigal son. Just guessing. But we've heard that story over and over and over again, all of our lives. But the context of that story is a meal. Jesus having dinner with tax collectors and sinners. And the Pharisees didn't like it. They criticized him. He welcomes sinners and eats with them. Because in the first century, unlike our fast food world, where it doesn't matter who you eat by, right? Just as long as you get a table. We'll go in the fast food restaurant and eat beside anybody. We don't know who they are, but in that culture, you just didn't sit down and eat with just anybody. You invited your family, your friends, the people you honored, the people you valued in your life, and they would sit around a table, and they really didn't sit around a table, they reclined around a table, and they would spend all night. I mean, they didn't have cable, so they weren't trying to get finished. They can go catch the next Home Shopping Network special or anything like that. I mean, they just would spend all evening around this table, breaking bread, having a meal, getting to know one another. And Jesus was doing that with people that were despised. And they didn't like it. And it's in that context, around that meal. You could preach a whole series, Steve, just the meals of Jesus in Luke. And see what Jesus did around tables, and you can learn how to disciple people. I mean, it happens around the table. And so he's sitting with these people, and again, you just didn't sit with anybody. You sat with people you valued, and so Jesus is sitting with tax collectors who were the most despised people in the whole town. In fact, they were their own class of sinner. A lot of times you read in the Bible that he was with sinners or tax collectors and other sinners. It's like if you're a tax collector, you get your own category of sin. And he's sitting with these folks eating, and the Pharisees are criticizing him, and he goes and he tells that parable, the prodigal son. He actually tells 3 parables. It's almost like if you don't get the first one, let me tell it to you again. He talks about a parable of a lost sheep, how the shepherd leaves 99 and goes find the one. The parable of the lost coin. That lost coin, ladies, that would be like losing your engagement ring. Because a woman would save silver coins her entire life to put 10 of them in a headdress to wear on her wedding day. And now she's lost one. Well, you can imagine what that search would be, right? And then, of course, the last one's the lost son. Now, that crowd was probably, that Luke is telling us about, is probably Matthew's crowd. Because Matthew was the tax collector who followed Jesus, who became one of his disciples. In Matthew chapter 9, we read as Jesus went on from there, he's in his hometown, he's in Capernaum, he's moved from Nazareth where they just wouldn't listen to him because he's just Mary and Joseph's boy, right? So he moves on to Capernaum and he's set up his ministry there, and Matthew is the tax collector. And so it says, Jesus saw a man named Matthew in Matthew chapter 9, verse 9 through 11, or 13, named Matthew, sitting at his tax collector's booth and said, "Follow me," he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. Now, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw it, they said, "Why does your teacher," ask his disciples, "why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" Because no self-respecting rabbi would do such a thing. No self-respecting leader of the faith would ever stoop so low as to break bread with tax collectors in their house. Him going to Matthew's house said, "Matthew, I consider you a valued person. I consider you a person of great worth and value. I'm coming to your house." Just like he told Zacchaeus, right? In the tree, he said, "Zacchaeus, come out of that tree," in Luke 19. "I'm going home with you today." You could pay no greater compliment to someone than to say, "I'm coming home to sit at your table." So that's what Jesus said to Matthew. "I'm coming home with you." And he ate. And so why does he do that? And on hearing it, Jesus said, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Now, WDJD, what did Jesus do? He opened his life up to people that the religious establishment rejected. Jesus opened his life. If we're going to be like Jesus, we've got to do the same thing. We've got to open our lives up. We've got to open our tables up. We've got to open our church doors up. Now, I know everybody's welcome, everybody's invited, and all that kind of thing, but most of them aren't coming. So we've got to do it somewhere else. We've got to do it in the neighborhoods, in our homes, with a grill. Somebody asked me, well, how do you plant a church? I say, well, you need two things. You need prayer and propane. Because we wore out a grill that first summer. Just inviting people over to our house. Inviting neighbors, inviting anybody we'd see. My kids hated going to the mall with me because it'd be a 3-hour trip. They'd be shopping, I'd be inviting, you know. We had one guy that said that we used to go to the pool in our neighborhood, you know, and go swimming every day, and that was the most fun I ever had in ministry. We'd go, for 3 months, not having a church was fun. Because I got to go do what I love to do, reach out to people, wherever they were. We had one guy that came to church, came to Christ, gave his life to Christ, said if he could have just swam faster, he would not have been ever a part of our church, because I just swam him down one day in the pool. You know, how you doing? You know? And come over and have a hamburger. You know? It's just simple. You just open your life. You open your house. You open your grill. You invite people in. You're not just inviting them in to eat, you're inviting them in to live. To be a part of you. That's what Jesus did. Now we read that like Jesus met Matthew one day, called him one day, and the rest is history. But it probably didn't really happen like that. There was probably time that Jesus spent developing a friendship, a relationship with Matthew. In fact, when you think about it, we've got 4 Gospels, right? And those Gospels cover 3 years, basically, of Jesus' life and ministry. And Matthew's the longest of the 4 Gospels, and he includes even a pretty lengthy birth narrative, and then even an incident in Jesus' boyhood. So out of 28 chapters, maybe 24, 25 of them are dedicated to Jesus' life, ministry, passion, resurrection. Now, of those 24 chapters, a huge chunk are dedicated to one teaching called the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And then another big chunk is dedicated to the last week of his life, the Passion. So we really don't have a lot of details about 3 years of his life, really. I don't know about you, but if you were to write a story about the last 3 years of your life, I bet it would get all the details in, take more than 28 chapters. And that's not all that Jesus did. So we don't have this blow-by-blow account. What we have instead are 4 accounts, 4 Gospels, and fortunately, they all tell pretty much the same story, and you start to see consistent patterns in those Gospels, and all 4 Gospels have a different rendering of the calling of the disciples. John's is very different than Matthew and Mark. Matthew and Mark, Jesus walking by the Sea of Galilee, sees Peter, James, and John, come follow me. Andrew sees Matthew, come follow me. It's pretty cut and dry, pretty quick, right? But in Luke, it's a little different. You have this whole fishing incident, where Jesus tells them to throw out their nets on the other side, and they catch this big catch of fish. And then in John, it's completely different. Does that mean they don't know the story? No, it just means it happened over multiple times. That Jesus invested in people's lives. He got to know them. He didn't just walk out one day and grab people randomly off the street and say, come follow me. Okay, you come follow me. All right, you come follow me. These are people he was getting to know, and they were getting to know him. So there's no telling how many times he sat down with people like Matthew and had dinner. Sat around the table. So we have these 4 accounts and we see these patterns, and one thing becomes really clear, folks. Jesus did not just hang out with church folk. He spent time in every gospel with the poor and the needy, the outcast, the sinners. I had a student in school, I was talking about this once, said, yeah, but that was just to get them to repent. I said, well, eventually, yeah, but that's kind of an oversimplification. I'm pretty sure he was friends with them first. At least that's what the Bible tells us. And Matthew was one of those. And I'm just guessing it might have gone off like this, that Jesus met Matthew there in his hometown. He probably had conversations with Matthew. And I'm just thinking that Matthew must have stood out among tax collectors because he would have been wealthy for one thing, and he had lots of room to have folks over. And he was from the hometown, so Jesus got to know him. And he got to know him around the table, breaking bread together, getting to know him. He's eating with sinners again. And Matthew invited Jesus to his house, or maybe Jesus invited himself like he did Zacchaeus. And I'm thinking that Matthew, watching Jesus, is probably like a lot of us. He had put his life and his happiness and fulfillment in the wrong things. Wealth, money, collecting taxes. Forget about your own people. It's all about you, all about taking care of number one. And that's kind of what a tax collector had to have, that kind of attitude. And I'm just thinking Matthew must have really got tired of that old life. Anybody ever got tired of that old life? You got tired of being a knucklehead, didn't you, brother? Yeah, I did too. I mean, you just finally get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I'm guessing Matthew might have gotten to a point in his life where he'd sit there at that booth and feel like he had no hope to be any different. I'll never change. I've betrayed my own people. Nobody's ever going to accept me. There's no way they would ever welcome me back in the synagogue. I'm just hopeless. And probably feeling like, man, there's got to be more to life than this. There's got to be more. And one day, Jesus comes up. Says, hey, Matthew, today's your day, brother. Come follow me. Come be my disciple. I bet Matthew couldn't get out of that tax booth fast enough. Thinking, oh man, there's hope. There's hope. He's calling me. Jesus wants me to be one of his disciples. I can't even believe it. I mean, Matthew must have been out of his mind at the possibility, at this invitation to come and be a disciple of Jesus. And I don't think we grasp how remarkable that really was. That Matthew would go from a degenerate outcast to a friend of Jesus. To not only a friend of Jesus, but a follower of Jesus. Not only a follower of Jesus, but one of the 12 apostles that would lead the church and carry on the mission of Jesus after his resurrection. And then not only that, but wrote the longest gospel in the whole Bible. I mean, Matthew hit the Powerball that day when Jesus said, follow me. His life took on a whole new meaning. I mean, just think about what Matthew gave us, his influence. There's no way he could have even begun to imagine what the Sermon on the Mount would mean to people for thousands of years. That still today, people that don't even know the Bible know the Golden Rule. They know the teachings of Jesus. People that, I've been to recovery groups before, and they say the Lord's Prayer almost every week. I mean, the influence that Jesus had through Matthew on the world is immeasurable. There's no way Matthew saw that coming. The Great Commandments in Matthew, the Great Commissions in Matthew. I mean, think about Christmas plays. We wouldn't even have wise men if it weren't for Matthew, right? How many ever played a wise man at a Christmas pageant? Let me see your hand. You just need to thank Matthew tonight that you had that starring opportunity in your life. But it all started with a very, very simple thing. An invitation. Where Jesus opened his life up to this hopeless tax collector. And it can be that simple. Just walking across the room, inviting someone into your life, opening up your house. I preached this same message at a revival in Monticello and had a lady come up to me after the service. She was in her 70s. And she said, you know what I'm going to do? I said, what? She said, I felt God calling me while you were preaching. I said, well, great. What's he calling you to do? I'm going to go home. There's all kinds of people who live on my street that don't go to church. And I'm going to start inviting them to my house for dinner once a week. I was like, wow. That's how you change the world. It's not some slick program coming down from denominational headquarters. It's not hiring the best preacher or the best teacher or the best staff member. It's not having the best facilities. It's none of those things. If those things worked, we'd have saved the world a long time ago. It's not contemporary music or traditional music. It's not Southern gospel or praise and worship. None of those things are what's going to save the world. If they were, it would have already happened. What's going to change the world is when one person opens up their life to another person and says, let me show you what it looks like to follow Jesus. Let me show you what it's like to be loved. Let me show you what it's like to have hope, to have a life of purpose. Come on into my life, and I'll show you. That's what these millennials are looking for. They're wanting people who know what it's like to walk the road, to invest in their life. Not just their education or their career or their wardrobe, but to invest in their life. And you are doing that. I mean, you just need to do it more. Let's just open it up and let every person here tonight say, God, I'm ready, I'm willing. And don't pray this prayer unless you mean it, because if you pray it, He will provide you the opportunities. If you mean it, pray it and say, God, I want to be used. I want to open my life up to someone so their life can be different. I want to open my life up to the person that has no hope so I can show them that they do have hope. I want to open my life, my family, my neighborhood up to people who need a fresh start, whether they be young or old or whoever they be. I got to see Meredith and my daughter Abby. Abby will be here tomorrow night, I think, to sing. And she and Meredith and Samantha Hadley were the ones you just mentioned that I was with from this church. I mean, you are doing something right. And God showed me that night that I had done something right, or maybe my wife had done something right, probably. Because we were down in the Dominican Republic on a mission trip. And the last day of the mission trip is beach day. Right? It's where all the teams, they've been working hard all week. You know, I did nothing but shovel gravel for a week, and I loved it. You know, when I go on a mission trip, I don't want to even do anything else. Just put me to some manual labor somewhere. So they did Bible school. I shoveled gravel. A couple of guys helped out. And so it was the last night we were at the beach. In fact, we chose the option of the overnight trip to the beach, which meant we stayed at an all-inclusive resort one night. Had to pay like extra $50 or something. All you can eat, you know, pools everywhere and scuba and snorkeling and all this kind of stuff. So we did that, went down on Sunday night, stayed Monday, flew back to home on Tuesday. Well, we're at this resort and we decided we don't like it. And it's a couple of times our church has done it and we don't like it. It's just, I don't know, it's just such a contrast. You've been in the poverty of Santiago and the slums all week and suddenly you got an all-inclusive resort with a whole bunch of drunk Europeans and Dominicans. Okay? And especially on Sunday night, all the Dominicans, that's when the Dominicans come for a weekend vacation, right? So it's karaoke night. Karaoke night at the big bar and club outside by the pool. And there's nothing worse. I hope you're not a big karaoke fan. There's nothing I hate worse than bad karaoke. In fact, I've never heard good karaoke. So it's all bad, right? It wouldn't be so bad if people just tried to have fun with it. But you get that person who thinks they should have been a star. And nobody's had the guts to tell them they can't be, you know. So they're up there singing some song, and it's like, whoa, don't quit that day job. You know, it's pretty rough. So I had about 10 minutes of it, and I said, I'm gone to bed. So I went on to bed. Our other pastor, James from Hope Springs, he turned in too. Jana, my daughter, was a trip leader. My oldest daughter, she went to bed. The missionary, John, he went to bed. I mean, we all seen all the karaoke we wanted to see in about 10 minutes. Well, some of the students, Samantha and Abby and Will and Meredith, they weren't there. there, they were down on the beach because we had had a team meeting on the beach, and we had had kind of our last debriefing, and we had had some worship and prayer, and we were talking. And so when we all got up to go up to karaoke night, they all stayed on the beach. And Abby plays guitar and sings, so they were singing, and Rachel and one of our other worship leaders from Hope Springs, there were 5 of them. And so they're down on the beach singing and all this stuff. And so after we've all gone to bed, they go up to the resort and they see karaoke night. And they go, oh my gosh, we've got to get up there and sing and tell these people about Jesus. Well, it was closing. It was 10 o'clock. Karaoke night was over. And Abby and Meredith and Sam and Will and Rachel, they go backstage and get the staff, the resort staff, and start saying, oh, can't we sing? Can't we sing? And they're like, no, it's the close, I'm going to go to bed. That's a pretty bad accent, I know, but you see what I'm saying, right? So they try to talk them into it, and then finally Abby, my daughter, goes, but it's my birthday. And it was June 30th, it's her birthday. It's my birthday. Well, you say birthday or anniversary around the resort staff in the Dominican, and it suddenly is, oh, birthday, it's party time. They go get a cake. They're bringing everything back out, open it back up. It's a birthday. It's a big celebration. So they let them go out on this stage. And there's about 200, and I'm not exaggerating, about 200 Europeans primarily, and Dominicans who are all about half tanked. Been drinking all night, right? And they're all out there for this karaoke, and out come these 5 college students with a couple of guitars and 1 microphone, 1 handheld mic, and Abby and Rachel play this song by a group called Need to Breathe, called Washed in the Water. And Will, who knew, has the exact voice of the lead singer of the guy in Need to Breathe. He sounds exactly like him. I've been with Will all week. I knew he could crack a lot of jokes. He'd crack me up for a week. I had no idea he could sing. And he's singing this song, Need to Breathe, and they're describing it to me. I wasn't there. But a silence just fell over the place because this wasn't karaoke. These are 5 college students playing guitars and singing this song about being washed by the water. And then at the end, they go directly into nothing but the blood of Jesus. And they're out there singing this song, and it's total silence. And afterwards, people come up to them and start going, what were the words to that song? It was beautiful. Abby and Rachel both speak Spanish, and so they were conversing with them and said, oh, what was that about? And they're telling them about Jesus. Now, I started thinking about this later, and I thought, where did they get that? You're at an all-inclusive resort in the Dominican Republic on the beach, and you're a college student, and your pastors have all already gone to bed, by the way. The missionaries have gone to bed. The trip leader's gone to bed. It wasn't on the agenda anywhere. But here are these 5 college students saying, how can we get on that stage and tell these people about Jesus? Now that's discipleship. And all I can figure is somebody's invested in their lives. Somebody's shown them what it means to follow Jesus. And their hearts were on fire to tell people about Him. So maybe we just need to read about what Jesus did and do what Jesus did. The parable in that Luke 15, the back-to-back-to-back parables, I heard Bill Hybels break them down like this real quickly. Several years ago, he said, in each one, something of great value was lost. A sheep, a coin, a son. And in each parable, an all-out search was made. From the shepherd leaving his 99, from the woman tearing her house upside down, to the father standing out at the end of the road, just watching every day. waiting for that son to come home. I always like to tell people, if you're here tonight and you're lost, and you can be a good church member and be lost. I mean, you can sing songs and join the church and go to class and do lots of things, but not be connected in that vital relationship with Jesus. It's possible. You just probably are scared to tell anybody about it. But you can be lost. Or you can be just totally lost in sin, where you just have totally turned your back on God. Either one, it's still being lost. But here's the good thing. There's only one thing worse than being lost. It's being lost with nobody looking for you. And I've just got good news tonight. You've never been that lost. Because our God is a seeking God, and He's looking for you. He's searching for you. And the third thing that happened was there was a great celebration when they were found. So our role, it looks to me like in those three things, if you're lost, you can come home. That's the good news. But I think for the church, we've got to become that search and rescue team. That team that goes down into the rubble and pulls people out of the ruins and opens up life to them and says, come on out. You don't have to lay there under the ruins of a broken life any longer. There is hope. There's recovery. There is healing in Jesus. You can come out now and you can come home with me. And I'll open my life up to you. Those celebrations were something. The first was a celebration in heaven. That's all it says. And the next was rejoicing with angels, which was a little more personal. But the last one was just a family celebration. Rejoicing with family because somebody's come home. We need to reclaim that as a church, as the body of Christ in America. We need to reclaim that role to be that search and rescue team. So I just challenge you tonight. Two things. If you're lost, come on home. There's a place here. We'll pray with you. We'll rejoice with you. We'll love on you. And I don't care if you've been in church all your life. When I leave here tomorrow night, I'm going over to Lindsay for life, and they asked me to speak. And I'm not going to speak, but about 10 minutes if that's possible. Because I've got two students who are giving testimonies that are just absolutely incredible. One is the woman at the well. It's the testimony of addiction and shame. And the other is Nicodemus, which is a testimony about I've been religious all my life. I'm not alive. And this girl's testimony, she's pretended since she's 9 years old because everybody in her church and her family has always expected her to do the right thing, but she had never surrendered her life to Christ till last week. They're both equally lost, and now they're both equally found. And why we don't get it in the church is hard to understand. But we got to reclaim it. We got to reclaim that role. So I encourage you tonight, no matter how lost you may be, either in the shame of sin or the fear of being exposed in a false sense of righteousness, you can come home tonight. And the other challenge is for those of you who do know Christ, is to open your heart up even wider. Say, God, we want to do that. We want to open our lives and show people what it means to follow Jesus. So let's bow our heads. Pray. And I first just want to encourage anybody here that feels lost tonight. I'd like to pray for you. And again, you could be in church a long time and be lost. And Satan's telling you, oh gosh, you could never let anybody know where you really are. Because they wouldn't accept you. And just like every other lie Satan tells, that one's a lie too. It's a lie. If you're lost and you're faking it, Don't let his lie keep you from embracing life in Jesus. So I want to pray for you first, if you're that person. Just slip your hand up. Let me say a prayer for you tonight. Anyone. You've been so afraid of letting people know the real you. Your spouse doesn't even know. Your parents don't know. Your Sunday school teacher doesn't know. Your pastor doesn't know. They think you've got it all together, and inside you're in prison, and you're hurting, and you've bought all kinds of lies. Oh, you've managed to keep it under control. But it's not about control. It's about freedom. And he offers you freedom tonight and says, come home. Come out of hiding. If that's you, just put your hand up. I'm not going to call you out or tell the pastor who you are. I'm just going to pray for you tonight. Anyone? That describe anyone? Don't be afraid. Just put your hand up. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Thank you. Thank you. Praise God. I just really feel like God's dealing with some hearts right now. Anyone else? Anyone else? There's so much freedom when you finally come out of hiding. That girl at Lindsay said she was scared to death to go home and tell her papa because he was a preacher. And her mom, who was her Sunday school teacher, she was just scared to death. And I said, sweetheart, they're going to rejoice with you. Satan's one telling you they're going to be upset or disappointed. They're not going to be disappointed. They're going to be thrilled. She goes home this past weekend, tells her testimony in her papa's church. And her mother, in tears, came up and said, I felt the same way before. She came back with a smile bigger than I'd ever seen this week. So is that you? You've been hiding behind this false sense of religion and you really want to embrace a relationship with Jesus. I'm going to pray right now in just a second. I won't give anybody else a chance. Just slip your hand up. Anyone else? Okay, God, I thank you tonight that you know every heart. You know, God, where we are, where we're lost. You know the lost places we get in. You know how we hide. And God, you know the lies that we believe. And I just pray tonight for truth to break through into those hearts who've been pretending. They don't have to pretend anymore. I just pray tonight they would come home to you. Just realize that you've never left. You've never stopped loving. You're not disappointed. You're just longing for that new, fresh relationship with your son or your daughter, your child that you claimed in baptism, that you claimed long ago, that you purchased by the blood of your only son. I pray tonight they come home. And if there's anyone else that just tonight you just know you need to change, you're lost, you're without hope, life's beating you up, and you're tired of living in the brokenness. You want to come home tonight, just take a step towards Christ. Put your hand up, I'll pray for you. No pretense, you're not even pretending to be religious. It's just, it's obvious. I want to say a prayer for you. Anyone. God wants to meet with you tonight. Don't put it off any longer. Anyone at all. I'm going to pray. If you want to slip your hand up, I'll pray for you. God, you know hearts and you know lives, and I just pray tonight that we would just hear your call to come home. And God, I pray that anyone who's here tonight without hope, that they would find hope in you. And I pray tonight, God, that this church would be filled with your Spirit, God, a passion for the lost, a passion for those that no one else will reach out to. A passion, God, for the hurting and broken. Those who are struggling with addiction, those who are lost in fear, those who are in broken homes, fatherless children. God, I pray in the name of Jesus that this church would just be so filled with that compassion, that the same thing they've passed on to those seniors that are now in college, that they would pass on to a hurting world. And that real revival would come way beyond what we do here this week. That it would spread throughout neighborhoods and families and communities, workplaces, where people open their lives to the hope of Jesus. I just thank you in His name. Amen. Let's stand, and Steve, I'll let you go ahead.